Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee and today I wanted to talk about setting yourself unrealistic targets. So today's video is actually inspired by a video that I saw on YouTube today. I'm filming this about a week in advance from Tabletop Generals and it was rather sadly entitled "I Have Failed" and it was only a very short video. Always enjoy the stuff that he puts out, but this was quite depressing actually. He was basically announcing that the project that he was going to try and do, he wasn't going to hit it. He decided that his targets were unrealistic and there was too much work for him to do, and he wasn't earning enough revenue to really be able to finance and push the project along, and it was delivered in such a sad, melancholy way. I just felt so down when I just watched it, and I felt sorry for him, because we've all been there. We've all had grand ideas and started projects but not been able to see them through. So I'm as guilty as anyone else in setting myself unrealistic targets and sometimes pushing myself a little bit too much. I don't like to be idle, and so I've usually got a lot of things on the go, and I know it's a fault actually, because sometimes I do get a little bit overwhelmed with all the things that are going on, work and life and hobby, and I just think, like, why am I pushing myself so much? Why don't I take some time away from it? And I'm not about to, so don't panic there. But it has to be said that, while there's a benefit in pushing yourself, in setting yourself a target that is challenging, there's a fine balance between being challenging and unachievable. So as with many of these sort of problems, I think the solution really comes down to planning, really. Knowing the breadth and the scope of a project before you start, or at least having some idea of what might be involved and what you need to spend money on and what needs to be worked on and so on before you start a project. Now, we've all done projects that last many years, and as I've said before, no period or project is ever complete. Not in the wargaming world. We are all slightly megalomaniacal, and I think very few of us can say we've finished a project. However, sometimes you have a deadline. So for instance, if you're running a game for a demo show, or you want a particular game ready for your club night or something like that, then something needs to be finished. You need a final product. You need to have everything done and you're ready to play. Now I'm going to be running a demo game next year. The Rejects, we always do broadside and we put on a small game, and I've been told that it's my turn, which is fair enough. So I'm going to come up with a game for next year, and I've been trying to have some thoughts on what it is I want to do, and I've spent the last few days basically mapping out exactly what units I want. I've even had a thought about what the scenario is that I want to play, so that I can decide what units I need, what do I need to buy, even down to working out the cost and where I can get certain types of bases and movement trays and bits of terrain and so on. There's some stuff I've already got, but I want a very clear idea, because I know I'm setting myself a challenge, because when we do our demo games, generally all of the work falls on the person that's going to run that game, and this is no different, so I'm not complaining, but I'm going to be aiming towards a particular date, presumably somewhere in the middle of the year, when presumably broadside will go back to its normal schedule. So I know I have a finite amount of time in which to collect, paint and prepare everything that I need for that particular point in time, and I don't want to start something that's unrealistic, because I've let the group down. So I've been planning that out, and I'm confident that I can get everything that I need to get done. And without that bit of planning, I could have easily have gone too grand, too big, and found myself with a project that was unmanageable. Now I don't know if that's what has happened to Tabletop Generals, but clearly he felt that he'd reached a point where he decided, no, this can't be achieved by the deadline I'd set myself. And there's two things I'd get out of that. One is, be flexible with your deadlines if you can, and as I've already said, planning is key. It does help to work out all the kinks. You can see the problems that you're going to encounter ahead of time. Now, you can't think of everything, but planning certainly gets you part of the way, and then you can, from that plan and knowing exactly what needs to be done, you can come up with a realistic timetable for achieving it. And this is the same way that I would tackle a problem at work, for instance. So it's just taking those sort of work-based skills and putting them into our hobby environment. The other thing that he mentioned in his video is finances. Well, we all have that to a greater or lesser extent. We've got to know that we can finance that project as well. So again, planning, knowing exactly what you want down on the table at a particular point in time helps you to narrow down. You don't end up going off into cul-de-sacs and painting stuff that you're not going to need, or spending money on models that are not going to see the table for that particular game. If you're aiming for a particular point in time, like a demo game, then you really need a very tight list of exactly what is it I need, exactly what do I have to buy, and exactly what do I have to paint and when to get it ready for that particular date, so you can plan ahead. While I did sympathise with Tabletop Generals, and it was a fairly melancholy video, at the same time I thought it was a good jumping off point for today's video, where I could just say that I've personally, my approach to these sort of problems is a lot of planning, and a lot of time online. I'll spend a lot of time online figuring out where I'm going to get stuff from and exactly what I need and so on before I even spend a penny. So I very rarely, I've said this before, I have gone to shows and come back with armies that I didn't intend on having, but I tend to try not to do that now. I very rarely buy stuff without pre-planning it in advance, so at least I've got some idea of exactly what's involved, particularly if I'm painting for a particular deadline. And as I say, I'm going to be working towards a project for the next summer, so more on that at a later date, much later date probably, because I'm still at the planning stage at this stage. I haven't even bought any models, nothing, so that's to come. So that's it. I've waffled enough for now. Just say check out Tabletop Generals, great site, puts out some really interesting stuff. And give your love and your support to this guy, because he seemed very down in his last video, and I think he could do with some visitors and some cheering up. So as usual, I'd say if you've got any comments, any observations or experiences that you'd like to share about preparing for a deadline and setting yourself realistic or sometimes unrealistic goals, please, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below or over on my blog, Big Lee's Miniature Adventures. And of course, if you did like the video, please like, subscribe and share. So until next week, stay safe, get in as many games as you can, and of course, keep rolling high.